$26,266,877. That is how much stock Fortinet's founder and chief executive sold across 6 separate transactions in a single day, while the Nasdaq was ripping 2.59% higher. Today, we break down whether that is a scheduled cash-out or the man who knows the company best selling into strength. Plus a microcap up 434% and a jobs number almost nobody flagged. Let's start with the tape. The S&P 500 closed at 7,735.60, up 1.78%. The Nasdaq Composite finished at 26,584.99, up 2.59%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average settled at 54,085.88, up 1.71%. So a clean, broad advance with a clear growth tilt. The Nasdaq beat the Dow by roughly 90 basis points. Here is the detail that matters, and it is the one most recaps will skip. The VIX did not fall. It rose 4.03% to 16.50. On a day when the S&P adds nearly 1.8%, implied volatility normally bleeds lower. When it climbs instead, it tells you the options market is paying up for protection into upcoming catalysts even while spot prices melt higher. That is a rally with its hand near the exit. Sector breadth backs that up. On the Nasdaq tape, communication services led at plus 2.15%, energy followed at plus 1.26%, consumer defensive plus 0.75%, consumer cyclical plus 0.63%, and basic materials was the laggard at plus 0.58%. Everything green, but the spread between best and worst was more than 1.5 percentage points. This was a concentrated, mega-cap communications-led move, not an everything rally. CNN's Fear and Greed Index sits at 58. Reading greed. Elevated, but not extreme. There is room to run and room to break. Now, the 3 stories that actually matter. Story 1. Xie Ken, Fortinet's president, chief executive, and director, sold $26,266,877 of Fortinet stock on August 3rd. 161,482 shares spread across 6 separate transactions. 6 transactions in one day is the fingerprint of a prearranged, rules-based selling program, not a panic exit. That is the honest read. But here is the original point. Mechanically executed sales still tell you something about calendar and size. This is a founder monetizing at an average of roughly $163 per share into a tape where the Nasdaq just added 2.59%. Founder CEOs are usually the last holders to trim because their identity is tied to the equity. When one liquidates $26 million in a single session, the practical takeaway for investors is not sell. It is this: expect persistent supply. If you own Fortinet, you are competing with a scheduled seller every quarter, and that structurally caps how fast the multiple can re-rate on good news. Story 2. The macro data was soft, and the market ignored it, deliberately. JOLTS. Job openings for June came in at 7.359 million, against an estimate of 7.4 million and a prior reading of 7.537 million. That is a miss and a decline. Factory orders for June fell 0.3% month over month, versus an expected plus 0.2%, after a prior negative 1.1%. That is 2 consecutive negative months of factory orders. The trade balance printed negative $73.3 billion, with exports at $314.7 billion and imports at $388 billion. Read those together and you get a real economy that is cooling, fewer job openings, contracting factory demand. The equity market's interpretation was straightforward. Weak data pulls forward rate relief, and lower discount rates lift long-duration growth names hardest. That is exactly what the sector table showed. The risk is obvious. If the labor data keeps deteriorating, the story flips from cheaper money to weaker earnings, and the Nasdaq's leadership becomes its liability. Story 3. Look at today's gainers and losers side by side, and you will see the same trade twice. 3 leveraged Palantir products, the leveraged shares 2 times long, the granite shares 2 times long, and the direction daily Palantir bull 2 times shares, closed up 58.13%, 58.03%, and 58.01%. On the losers list, the daily target 2 times short Palantir product fell 58.71%. That is a roughly 29% single-day move in the underlying, amplified in both directions. And Palantir mentions on Reddit rose 66.1% to 274. Also worth noting, Autonomix Medical spiked 434.25% to $19.50 after announcing a broad new United States patent covering nerve sensing, mapping, and targeted therapy. Meanwhile, Rightar Logtech fell 57.26% to 14.61 cents, just one day after announcing a smart warehousing partnership with Caniao Group. Good news, price down 57%. That combination almost always means dilution or share supply, not sentiment. The lesson, in microcaps, the press release is not the trade. To the Congress and Insider Desk, Representative April Delaney of Maryland's 6th District disclosed 5 purchases on August 4th, each in the $15,001 to $50,000 range. She bought Formula One Group twice, on July 23rd and again on July 28th. She bought Martin Marietta Materials on July 24th, Hubbell on July 23rd, and Tempur Sealy International on July 30th. That is a real pattern, not a one-off. Aggregates, electrical infrastructure, and a consumer durables name, a bet on building and equipping physical things, funded on the same week. On the corporate insider side, beyond Fortinet, Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos sold $9,733,585 of Netflix across 3 transactions on August 4th, 133,162 shares. And the only buy in the file, Durable Capital Partners, a 10% owner of Goosehead Insurance, purchased $2,245,140 across 2 transactions on July 31st. Note the asymmetry. Roughly $36 million of executive selling against $2.2 million of institutional buying. That is a very common late-cycle ratio. Earnings. There were no scheduled United States reports on today's calendar, so the action moved to the research desks, and the price targets told an interesting story. Wix.com had its target lowered to $95 from $120 at Evercore ISI. But with the stock at $66.78, that cut still implies 42.3% upside. Harmony Biosciences had its target trimmed to $70 at Oppenheimer against a $38.78 price. 80.5% implied upside on a downgrade of expectations. 3D Systems was upgraded to buy from hold at Craig Hallam with a $6 target versus $3.66. Shoals. Technologies was raised to $13 at Oppenheimer from $9.38, and Vitesse Energy was cut to $22.50 from $25, still 44.9% above spot. Pattern. Analysts are lowering targets while leaving enormous implied upside, a sign that models are being marked to reality faster than convictions are. Looking ahead, the calendar is mostly international. Thursday, August 6th, brings Indo Tankers Mega, with earnings per share estimated at 428.11. Friday, August 7th is the heavier day, with 3 reports including one carrying a revenue estimate of $22.35 trillion in local currency and another at $15.14 trillion. Then Monday, August 10th, brings a report with earnings per share estimated at 2,083.81. Why care? Because Korean and Indonesian industrial and commodity results are a live read-through on global memory, coal, and shipping demand, the same cycle Micron is exposed to, and Micron was the 4th most mentioned ticker on Reddit today, with 420 mentions. Also watch AMD. Mentions jumped 896.5% to 857, the single largest retail attention shift in the dataset. That kind of spike usually precedes a volatility event, not a quiet drift. Bottom line, Stocks surged on weakening data while volatility and executive selling both rose, a rally worth respecting and not trusting. Subscribe for tomorrow's numbers.